Good evening, sailors. I'm Captain Tom Tursi from the Maryland School of Sailing and Seamanship, and our topic tonight is traveling the Intracoastal Waterway down the east coast of the U.S. from up north down to the sunny shores of Florida. And our speaker tonight is Captain Frank Mummert, also of the Maryland School of Sailing and Seamanship. And Frank and his wife Suzanne have made the trip both southbound and northbound many times on Rockhopper, their Morgan 45 catch. So Frank has a lot of interesting observations and stories, and I hope some of them will be good lessons, but also some of them are rather exciting at times. So, so Frank, if you're ready.
Absolutely. Thank you for that intro. Yeah. There were, we made we were counting it earlier today. I think we came up with 16 trips up and down, up or down. And some of them were more interesting than others. But big picture, it was always a good trip. And it's kind of, this is kind of an unusual subject for us because obviously we're an offshore sailing school. We tend to focus on offshore or big boat sailing, and this is more of an inshore travel. We used to you cannot sail very much of the ICW at all in any kind of boat big enough to have comfortable accommodations. We did occasionally see people trying to sail down the ICW, and there's places when you could do it. There are some places where there's good sized bays and sounds, but for the most part, you are motoring. As a matter of fact, every year, every trip that we did, we would try to do at least one period where we would go out one ocean passage, one ocean inlet, and then come back a different one and try to do like 24 to 36 hours offshore because you can skip a lot of the ICW by doing that. Although, interestingly, there was one point late where we were following another boat. We were just behind another boat. We went out and they went on down the ICW. And they actually arrived, even though they had to deal with all of the ICW stuff, the shoals and the slow, the current and stuff like that. They actually arrived at the next big inlet before we did. So sometimes you make the decision and you get lucky and things go great, and sometimes you make the decision and you're dealing with a counter current the whole way down.
Yeah, and you had to also deal with going in and out of the inlets.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that my policy was if I had good weather 2 days from now, then I would think about going out because it would usually take me a day just to get the boat ready to go offshore. Traveling up and down the ICW is kind of like traveling in your family station wagon. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't get put away quite as neatly as you need it to be when you go offshore. And yes, we found that out the hard way. I want to talk a couple of things just real quick and then open it up to questions because this is easier to do by answering questions. But the first thing I want to talk about is navigating down the ICW. Navigating down the ICW is not like navigating in an open bay. It's not like navigating in the ocean. I had, at any given time while traveling up and down the ICW, I had at least 3 sources of information open all the time. I had my chart plotter at the binnacle, which was telling me where I was right now. And then I had this book, the Intracoastal Waterway Chart Book from Norfolk to Miami, 6th edition. This is from 2012. This is, as far as I can tell, this is the most recent edition of this, but it's still pretty accurate once you take into account the other things you're going to be dealing with. And this book basically is a set of charts, one right after the other, of the Intracoastal Waterway. If you're old enough to remember a AAA triptych, this is the nautical equivalent of a AAA triptych. It has a lot of information about the Intracoastal Waterway, including where the line is for the bigger areas, like you're crossing Albemarle Sound or Pamlico Sound or one of those. One of the things about the Intracoastal Waterway is it's marked in statute miles, not nautical miles. So all of these charts, these are basic U.S. Coast Guard NOAA charts that have nautical mile type information on them. The thing that the people who put this book together did is they actually marked where the statute mile marks are, which makes it a little easier to deal with. So the chart plotters tell me where I am. This is telling me where I'm going to be in the next 5 miles. These are about 5-mile increments. And then I usually had my iPad, and my iPad had a navigation, had the Aquamaps application running on it, and that was just off to one side from the binnacle. And the reason that was running was because of this information. The Army Corps of Engineers is tasked with keeping the it's keeping the intercoastal waterways open and dredged. And so as we went up and down, you could get the latest survey data on the intercoastal waterway. For example, here's a page relating the Dismal Swamp Canal plans for dredging, and includes the survey from 2015. And when you go to look at that, you can actually see what the most recent survey data was for any particular point in the intercoastal waterway. This is actually the most recent one here. And the thing about this is not only do they give you the data, but they color code it. And so you can see the dark red is shallow, the deep blue is deep, and the green is 6 to 8 feet. So you can actually follow this in Aquamaps, and it will show you where you are on that. But more importantly, it'll tell you if you're getting into this area. For example, if I was coming down through here and I was getting into this area, obviously this side is going to be far more shallow than that side. So, I want to stay over on this side of the channel. Same thing here. I get this really deep section, and then it's going to get shallower and shallower, and I need to stay off the edges to come around that corner. You don't want to cut that edge at all. Now, all of that information would go into the Aquamaps application. So I've got those things open. Then down below, I usually had the MapTech chart kit, the big one, and the MapTech chart kit. Yes, that is tricky for me to say. That had about 60 miles of travel per page on the Intracoastal Waterway, which was about 1 day. So just like as we would with doing our planning for one of our trips, the paper chart that I kept down at the nav table was my preparation for the day. When I got up in the morning, I would look at that and go, okay, I'm going to start here. I can make it to here. These are the places along that trip that I'm going to look for. These are the places that are going to be problems. And then I also had a laptop that was running an application that would give me more information about crowdsourced data. All of that's the planning phase. And then the stuff I had up at the cockpit was my operational stuff. Just like we do for offshore navigation, it's just much more pinpoint accurate. And you want to get more information up at the cockpit, particularly if just you and your significant other.
Frank, before you go on, there were two
Yeah.
questions here. One is the Corps of Engineers diagram that you showed with shoaling and so forth, all the pretty colors. How
Uh-huh.
often is that updated? Do you know?
They usually do a survey about every 24 months. So it's usually about 24 months out of, but there are places in the Intracoastal Waterway where the shoaling is much more rapid. And generally I've seen those done like once a year. It really comes down to how bad is the shoaling in that area and how often do they need to get in, because they're using that information to make their decisions about when to bring a dredge in. They're putting it out where we can see it, but it's being updated based on the dredging cycles.
So does recent shoaling show up in the notices?
Not so much in notices, but that actually leads into a different question or a different piece of information.
Before you go on to that, someone else asked the question, what would you repeat the name of the chart book that you
Uh,
showed?
yes, hold on just a second here. I'll bring it back up again because I'm going to go there anyway. The name of the book is the Intracoastal Waterway Chart Book, Norfolk to Miami. Now, there are some other ones that that you can get that are a little bit more recent, but I like this one because it is a flip book. You flip it page to page to page, so you're not going side to side to side. In order to get the most recent information, you can use an application called Active Captain. But interestingly, there's a gentleman named Bob 423. Now, Bob 423 is a guy who has gone up and down the Intracoastal Waterway many, many times. He is an engineer. He does a lot of really detailed work. And so his information, for example, it's this Bob 423 tracks. He actually, every year when he goes down, he posts the track that he took and where he avoided things and where he was able to keep on to keep out of trouble. And his information is, says it's verified tracks based on 24 passages from Norfolk to Key West, includes the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers survey, and includes the information from the dredging contracts. And now this is new, this Bob 423 surveyors tracks. These are actually where he has people that he trusts also providing information so that you can see, in this case, this was Bob's trip in 2022 going down or coming back. This was Sean Wells, and this was Michael Bell. So you can see how each of these people traveled and what they saw as a mean low water. So coming this far over, the mean lower low water was 6.7, but staying more to the left, Bob had 8.5, and the person who went through the center, the shallowest they saw was 9.7 mean low water, which is interesting because if you look at this, it shows them passing right over this area that's supposed to be 7.3 feet deep, but in fact, what they saw was 9.7. This is Bob's main page, bobicw.blogspot.com. And the most interesting thing about this is that this section here and this section here, the GPX routes and the long tracks, will actually give you information that you can input into your chart plotter, into your GPS with the actual GPS latitude, longitude points so that you can just follow from one to the other. And you can see here that in July 31 of 2025, so, you know, what, 3 days ago or a month ago, he moved the Bob 423 Norfolk to South Point track to avoid shoaling at Spooner Creek and Browns Inlet. So this is to me the most up-to-date information you can get on stuff on where the shallow parts are. And I can't say enough about Bob 423. Bob writes a book every year about his passage. This is the 2019 ICW Cruising Guide. by Bob 423. And if you can get them on Amazon, or you can get them through Bob's blog spot there. You can get his most recent book. They're all self-published. He's not making a lot of money. He basically says, if you'd like to stop by and share a glass of wine with me, I'm perfectly happy with that. He does have a spot set up where you can donate to him, but basically he is just doing this because it's his way of giving back to the community. The other thing I want to talk about is anchoring. We spent a lot of time on the anchor up and down. We did that deliberately. That's probably one of the biggest differences between Bob and myself. Bob went from marina to marina. I pretty much avoided marinas as often as I could. And we found a lot of really beautiful places to anchor along the way. But I will tell you that there are some spots where if you've got a tidal range of 8 to 10 feet, which a lot of these places did, there's a lot of water flow in there. And so being really sure of your anchor is a good thing. We used to use a primary anchor and then a secondary anchor. We had an all-chain road, and we would put the primary anchor down and then shackle a second anchor to it just to keep it in place. Under the heading of interesting stories, we were coming into Winya Bay, which is a bay in a method of getting onto and off between the ocean and the ICW down in South Carolina. It's south of North Myrtle Beach and north of Charleston. And we decided to duck in there when we were going up the coast, and things got a little bit too sporty for Suzanne and the dogs. And we decided to duck in there, and we were doing 6 knots over the ground or through the water, and we were doing 3 knots over the ground. So we had a full 3 knots of current on the bow for 3 or 4 hours trying to get in there. You just watch the lights and nothing's getting closer.
Frank, is most of the Intracoastal Waterway mud and sand, or are there any rocky areas?
Never saw any place that was really rocky. From basically the Chesapeake Bay down to south of Charles, or south of North Myrtle Beach was mud and kind of a silty mud. Below there, it was more of a thick clay mud, and generally speaking, it was that really stinky, there's stuff dying in this mud kind of thing. So, and the other thing I'm going to say about that is that Suzanne had a anchor watch on her phone. I had an anchor watch on my iPad. They were independent of each other, and we would both periodically wake up during the night and check to make sure we were holding it. When you're anchoring every night, pull up the anchor every morning and drop the anchor every night, it gets really hard to rest easily, not knowing whether or not the anchor is going to hold. We were relatively sure of our stuff, and we went out of our way to make sure we were hung up really good. But and to be honest, in the entire time we were going, we only drugged twice. The first time I had a CQR anchor, and as soon as that was the first trip down, we drug during a storm, and I got down to Florida and immediately got rid of the CQR and replaced it with a Rockna anchor. And the other time, I don't think we drug. I think we were drug. I think a crab boat may have decided we were a little bit too close to the channel, and because we had gone through 3 days of tide cycles without moving an inch, and then on the 4th night we found ourselves 300 feet from where we started. So I think we got moved.
Frank, there's a question about the second anchor. How did you shackle it to the primary anchor?
Main anchor was all chain rode, and the secondary anchor, which was a Fortress, had about 6 foot of chain on it. And so what I would do is I put the first anchor down, I'd let it out I had about 10 feet, so it was sitting 10 feet off the bow. Then I put the second, I would shackle physically the chain of one to the chain of the other, put the second anchor over the side, and then put them both down. And so they're about 20 feet apart. And then the first anchor is set and the second anchor is ready to set if we start to drag. It actually works more like a kellet than it does an anchor, but it's designed to keep the road, that 20 feet of chain road between the anchor and that second anchor, as flat as possible on the bottom, and to give it some resistance to twisting.
There's a question here about route to mile marker 0. And this gentleman says that he is up in Lake Champlain. And do you have any comments on route from Champlain to mile marker 0 or not?
I don't have a lot of experience up in that area. I do know that there is an Intracoastal Waterway portion inside the New Jersey shoreline, but I also I've heard that is very, very shallow. So what most people who do are coming out of the northern areas, the northern states and the northern provinces are doing is they're coming down in intracoastal to Sandy Hook, and then going offshore from Sandy Hook down to Cape May, and then coming in and doing the Delaware Bay, Chesapeake Bay, and then that puts you at mile marker 0.
Okay. And then there's a question, do you have a towing contract in case that happens?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that leads into another thing I want to show you all. This is kind of a companionway piece to the chart book. This is the cockpit guide. This is the commercial equivalent of the Coast Pilot, where the chart book is the commercial equivalent of the charts. It actually goes on a mile by mile basis. So this is from mile 15.2 to mile 51.4, and it actually lists all the stuff you're going to pass along the way on each page. And one of the things that it had on each page was the telephone number for the local Towboat US and CTOW for every section of the ICW. The idea of looking at that chart book, looking at your chart book and going, okay, in this section, the towboat telephone number is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think is an excellent piece of information to jot down there. The other thing we decided, and we decided this very early in the trip, if anything ever happened to one of us that we had to call for emergency services to get one of us off the boat to get to a medical facility, the second phone call we were going to make, whichever one of us was still on the boat, was to towboat, because we figured that if one of us was off the boat and the other one was left behind, the chance of the one left behind freaking out and not being able to find things like the next marina or the next place to go, towboat, every experience I had with towboat up and down the ICW, they were an amazing source of information. And the idea of calling towboat and saying, hey, I need to get into, the nearest place so that I can get, my wife has gone off and been taken off the boat for an emergency medical need. Towboat would have been there, and they would have towed us to wherever we needed to go, gotten me off the boat, and would have gotten everything under control. Having that extra set of hands available was just a little bit of insurance, a little bit of kept my heart able to sleep at night, knowing that I had that as a backup if I needed it.
That's a great idea. Someone asked the question, Frank, of can you estimate how much of the time you sailed versus motoring? And I guess I would relate to that question of, did you yourself actually sail in the ICW, or was all your sailing offshore?
All of our sailing was offshore. Well, I did occasionally go ahead and put the head sail out on some of the bigger bays, but it was always motor sailing. If we were going sailing, we would go offshore. We tried to get, like I said, between 24 and 36 hours offshore every trip, partly because it cut, especially around Georgia. You could come out of St. John's River, or you could come out of St. Augustine and head north, and in about 36 hours, you could cut in at southern South Carolina and rejoin the ICW very easily and skip over all of Georgia. Georgia is very muddy, Georgia, and it takes 3 days to travel the ICW in Georgia. So 36 hours offshore could cut a lot of time off that bottom end of the trip.
Frank, there's also a couple of questions on darkness. Can you travel during the darkness? And then someone else asked, in North Carolina, is North Carolina safe to travel at night?
Okay. I never traveled at night. I always made sure that I was anchored. I do know that there are some people who travel at night, but to me, the issue is most of the commercial traffic that's going to run up and down the ICW tries to move at night, because that's when there's not a lot of recreational traffic. And so trying to move up and down at night, that's when the monsters are out there. And there's a lot of places in the ICW where it's very difficult to see something coming or to accurately judge where it's coming from. I once passed a cruise ship in the ICW coming through a salt marsh just north of Charleston, between Charleston and Winyah Bay. It was about 350 feet long. It had, I've looked it up, it had like 200 passengers and probably 150 crew members. It's an inland cruise ship, and they cruise the ICW for people who don't want to do it on their own. When I saw it coming, I didn't know where we were going to meet, so I stopped at the widest spot I could find, sat off to one side, and just held my position and waited till it passed us. I won't say they were close, but I could tell you what the croissants smelled like in their bakery.
Smelled good. They didn't offer you any though, right?
It did smell good by that point.
Are the nav aids lighted?
Some are, a lot aren't. And to be honest, some of the best nav aids are the crab pots that mark the edges of the deep water. And they are not lighted at all. But you'll be coming along the channel, and the channel is like maybe 150 feet wide and about 25 feet in on both sides. There's a set of crab pot markers all the way down, and you know that you don't want to be between the crab pot markers and the dirt. It makes a nice little, there's an aid to navigation 3/4 of a mile away, but those little red dots going down both sides make a much better marker.
How's cell phone service?
There is a section in the Alligator River, which is between the Albemarle Sound and the Pamlico Sound in North Carolina, where we were never able to get cell phones or VHF radio traffic at all at the north, or technically the south end of that river. That was the only place where we had trouble. We traveled with some other boats 1 year, 2 years, and we had Verizon, and they had Sprint, and they had more trouble connecting in some places. But overall, I think that most of that's improved. I would still think that area in the Alligator River is going to be iffy, because it is truly in the middle of nowhere. It's used as a bombing range for Navy jets out of Oceania, and sometimes that is the only thing out there for miles.
Frank, how many days from Norfolk to Miami?
I would say that on average it took about a month. Norfolk to Vero Beach, which is kind of in the middle of the Florida's East Coast, would take about a month. A lot of that would depend on how many times we decided along the way to stop and spend a couple of days in a marina and how much we could get offshore. Because like I said, if we could go from southern South Carolina, skip all the way around Georgia and then come in at say, Fort or St. Augustine, that would shave a week off the trip, or at least 6 days off the trip. Since we only traveled at during the lighted hours, and since we were traveling in November to December, we were at the shortest part of the season. So we spent a lot of time in the dark on the anchor. The other thing I'm going to say about that is that you can go faster or you can go slower, but it's going to take about a month. Since I'm thinking about it, the Intracoastal Waterway from mile marker 0 to mile marker 1095, which is in Biscayne Bay, just south of Miami, a third of that is in Florida. So basically, you get to Florida. The first time we got there, we were like, oh, we're in Florida. Yay. We crossed the line and we were in Fernandina Beach and we were like, yeah, we're in Florida, without realizing that we're only 2/3 of the way through the trip. There's a lot more to go. There was another week and a half before we got to Vero Beach. Now, Vero Beach is this community on the East Coast. It's south of Cape Canaveral and north of Fort Lauderdale, and it is, well, the cruising community tends to refer to it as Velcro Beach because people get there and get stuck. It has a free bus service. It has all of the facilities you need. It's got a West Marine within walking distance. It's got a Publix, got one of the best Publix I've ever been to, right across the street from the West Marine. So you can catch the bus to the West Marine, do your West Marine shopping, cross the street, do your Publix shopping, get back and pick the bus up on the way back to the marina. The bus goes all the way out to Walmart, goes to all kind of places. And Suzanne had doctors that were, her Florida doctors down there. The dogs had a vet down there. And so what we would do is we would go down to Vero Beach and we would provision, spend basically about a week in that area. They have probably, there are more mooring fields in Florida than there are in the rest of the ICW combined. And so you could get on a mooring ball down there and take the dinghy in, or take the water taxi in, do all your provisioning, get all your stuff done. And then what we would do is we would look at the weather, and we would try to determine where the daytime temperatures were about 75 and the nighttime temperatures were about 65, where that band was. And then we would move up and down the East Coast of Florida and stay in that band. So we were always 75 during the day, 65 at night. Sometimes a couple of years that meant we went all the way down to Miami. A couple of years that meant we spent a lot of time up in St. Augustine. But by being able to move up and down the coast to stay in that comfort zone for us, that was our winter. It was great. You may remember, Tom, when we were talking about the 106, we were putting together the 106 book, and you and Steve and Jochen and I were all on the phone. I was in this wonderful marina in Ormond Beach, I want to say. And you guys were all looking so cold and chilly up there, and I was just all kinds of pleasant. Not being,
Yeah,
not
right.
trying to make you jealous, but still.
We enjoyed the freezing weather.
Yeah.
Are there good anchorages marked, or are they in those books that you refer to?
They are. Each of these pages will actually have anchorages marked on them, usually with a letter that The letter corresponds to a list of places in the glossary of the book. Bob, Bob 423 has a lot of good information, but that other book that I talked about, so this is Oriental North Carolina between 180.7 and 183.9. It says there's an anchorage behind the breakwater. There is information buried in here about the anchorages. And then as you get into these, into some of the deeper areas, there's more information about them. The other place, and really the best place for this information, is Active Captain. Aquamaps. Aquamaps can integrate that Active Captain information. I had the other thing I had was a application, a charting application on my laptop called Coastal Explorer, Grosse Pointe Coastal Explorer, and that also integrated that information. You can the Navionics app that you can get on your phone or your tablet, I think integrates that information. So there's a lot of sources for that. It was originally just a crowdsourced standalone application, and then Garmin bought it, and Garmin has continued to put the information out there for free. You can bring it into a bunch of different systems to get to bring that information up. But if you that Active Captain or Waterway guide have good sources of information about every anchorage that you could see down there. Now, excuse me, one of the things about Active Captain is because it's crowdsourced data, sometimes people will anchor in areas that you might look at that and go, yeah, that's not an area I want to go. You got to take into consideration that sometimes people have a higher or lower risk tolerance than you do, and you may look at something and go, yeah, I can see that this guy anchored in there, but I'm not going to put my boat in there, and that's part of that information. But yeah, there's a lot of good information on those anchorages, and anchorages up and down the ICW are wonderful. Sitting in that in a place where there's nothing around you, watching the sun go down and eating dinner in the cockpit, it's just, oh, I can't tell you how much I miss that.
Tough life.
It was a tough life, yeah. Now it could get chilly. There was early trip down. We were in just south of Charleston, and the weather dropped down to highs in the 40s. And I declared a manifestly unsafe voyage, and we went into a marina for 3 days while we waited for that cold front to pass. But that was truly unusual. There was very seldom that we ran into that.
Okay, there's a question here: mosquitoes or no-see-ums? Question mark.
Oh, I don't. This is one that I don't remember mosquitoes or no-see-ums. I do know that there were people who were bothered by them. I think if you ask Suzanne, the answer would be slightly different, that there were some places where we were uncomfortable. Most of the time, though, if you check Active Captain or you check the Waterway guide, it's going to tell you if there was bug infestations in those areas.
How about that?
Yeah, this was a great anchorage until 10 o'clock, at which time the mosquitoes came in, kind of thing. I'm for some reason I don't attract mosquitoes. I must have sour blood, but Suzanne's definitely a mosquito magnet. So
we didn't want to tell you about your BO,
Hey, if it kept me mosquito free, I'll go with it. I will say that that does bring up an interesting point. When you're staying on the anchor every night, you're not showering every morning to get started. Usually we would stop we would plan to pull into a marina about every 5 or 6 days, and it was to pick up any food that we needed, like fresh bread or something like that, do laundry, and take showers. Not necessarily in that order. Sometimes it was start the laundry, take the shower, and then grab the laundry on the way out. But if you're the type of person who has to take a shower every day, you might want to consider more marinas and less anchoring.
Frank, I wanted to point out one of the YouTubes that we have on our channel that has to do with the nav aids in. So can I go there?
That's fine. Yeah,
All right. Do you see this chart?
I do.
Yeah. Okay. So just for everyone's information, there's a system of the yellow labels. If you can see it on these nav aids here, it's a yellow square here, and there's a very faint yellow triangle. And the issue is that if you have, here's the ICW coming like along this line where the blue arrow is, and here's a route coming in from the sea. So this person coming in from the sea sees the reds to his right and the greens to his left, okay? But the person coming down the ICW at this point sees a red on his right with a yellow triangle and a red on his left with a yellow square. Well, the yellow square means it's a green as far as the ICW person goes, and the yellow triangle means it's a red. But over here, you have two greens for the ICW person, and they see a green with a yellow triangle, which signifies that it is a red to you, and a green with a yellow square, which signifies it's a green to you. So this is a YouTube channel to go through the whole thing, Intracoastal Waterway Navigate Markings. You can go there and see the whole description of this.
Those markings are there on the ones where it gets confusing, but as the picture shows, 1 and 3 there don't have the marks on it. So you got to watch for the yellows. This is another good reason not to travel at night, because something is a blinking red may or may not actually be a red for you on the ICW.
Can you explain how you got there?
I went to our YouTube channel, Intracoastal Waterway Navigate Markings. Is the water swimmable for short swims?
I wouldn't. It's got a lot of tannic in it. It's got a lot of mud in it. But I will tell you that every day, and this was a rule, every day we saw dolphins, and we could be 75 miles off the ocean in some little creek in back in North Carolina or South Carolina, and dolphins would pass us. So they found it swimmable. I wouldn't, but then I have a fundamental opposition to being in anything that I can't see through any more than I absolutely have to.
Yeah, well, tough people swim in the Atlantic on January 1st. Yeah. So there's another question. What draft would you say you would take down the ICW? I would add to that, what about mast height?
I saw boats that were in the 7-8 foot draft range, but they had to be really, really careful. They took a lot longer. They took longer because they had to time the tides so that they were going through places, the shoaly places on the high tides, where I had a 5 foot draft, and I very seldom had any problems. There were a couple places where I generally had to go through at half tide or better, but for the most part, a 5 foot was good. I think I might go to 6, but I wouldn't go much beyond that. Mast height, almost all of the bridges on the Intracoastal Waterway are 60. They're supposed to be 65 feet tall. There are several that are closer to 64 feet because I think they've settled some in the mud around the ICW, and then there's one down near just north of Miami called the Julia Tuttle Bridge that's basically at 60 feet or 58 feet. And so everybody who heads down that way, every sailboat that heads down that way ends up going out at Fort Lauderdale and skipping down a couple of entrances and then coming back in at Miami, at Federal Cut in Miami. So a mast of 60 feet or shorter should be fine. Once you get to 62, you're beginning to get a little iffy. You don't want to have anything topping your mast. I will tell you that some friends of ours who had an ocean-going boat, the boat's name was Totem, and they had circumnavigated, and they were going to pass under a bridge in North Carolina that's supposed to be 65 and is really closer to 64. So what they did to get underneath this is they flooded the bilge. They hung their outboard motor on the end of the boom, and then they put their teenage kids on the boom and swung it out. So the boat heeled over just enough for them to get under that bridge. And I was behind them when they did this. I watched them. I think I even have pictures of it someplace. I was terrified for them because all I could think of is one kid falls off and all of a sudden they're trapped underneath the bridge. So they actually made it down to Beaufort, Morehead City, and decided to go out from there down to Miami because it was just too much. And then, you know, if you're not going under a bridge, you're stopped and waiting at a lift bridge, and there are a goodly number of those on the ICW too, and you're timing yourself all the time with those.
Well, and related to that, do the tidal swings in the ocean affect the level in the ICW?
Yes, in some places, yes. More often, it's not the height that changes; it's the tidal current. So you're coming up on one tide, on one ocean inlet. The tide is coming in, so you're fighting the current all the way up to the inlet, and then you can cut across the inlet, and you suddenly gain 3 knots of speed, and you're going 7-8 knots until you get halfway between that inlet and the next inlet, and then it slows down, and you're starting to fight the current for the next one. So if the current's coming in, you're fighting one side at the inlet and riding on the other side of the inlet. And that's why it's tidal current charts for the ICW are pretty useless because you're going to get what you're going to get, and it actually averages out more often than not.
So does the NOAA Tides and Current website show tides and current for stretches of the ICW?
Yeah, it shows at the inlets. So you'll know when it's coming in and going out, but you won't know what it's doing on the ICW itself.
So for our audience, if you go to NOAA Tides and Currents, that'll show you both the tide levels everywhere, but they have it broken down into various specific locations.
Yeah.
And Frank, there's a question here about experience level. What would you say is the minimum experience level for someone to make that trip? It sounds like a lot of it is navigation.
A lot of it is navigation. A lot of it is, I'd say, I put it in 2 categories. Navigation is huge. You've got to be able to do your planning part, your preparation part, and then do your operation part. The other thing is that it helps to have a good toolbox because you know the old expression about cruising is fixing your boat in strange and exotic places.
Right.
I had to fix stuff along the way a lot of times. I had an oil leak offshore, just off the southern end of South Carolina, and had to scoot in to get to a place where I could get the hardware I needed to fix it. Had a muffler gasket, a heat exchanger gasket start to blow out on me 2 days before that same spot, as a matter of fact. Got really good at fixing my boat in southern South Carolina. You know, knowing you're going to be in places where It helps to know how to do basic engine stuff, how to do basic, pump stuff, how to do basic electrical stuff, because you're not always going to have a really nice marina with a boatyard and all that kind of stuff for 100 miles, 75 miles.
Yeah, so motoring your boat down a protected waterway is easy, but navigation and mechanical repairs seems like the two big skills that you need.
Yeah, yep. A lot of people travel in a group. There's the snowbird rally. There's a lot of people will meet up with friends and head south or head north. And there's safety in numbers. There's support in numbers. We never did that. The most we did is we ran with one other boat for all of North Carolina and part of South Carolina. As you know, we would leave late because we had to get the boats ready to come out of the water. So we would leave in the middle of November, which is actually past when most people are traveling. But to me, that was an advantage, because it meant that I very seldom had to worry that I was going to get into a anchorage and not be able to find a spot. That becomes more of a problem the farther south you get, because some people don't go all the way to Florida. Once you get into Georgia, you'll find people who stopped, particularly Hilton Head, the Hilton Head area, and the Brunswick area tends to get people make it that far and stop.
Okay, I think we've pretty much wrapped it up. Frank, thank you very much for your expert knowledge here and presentation. Excellent answering of questions. And thank you to our audience for participating. Been great talking with you.
And happy to have that experience with you, Tom, and look forward to next month when we can do this all again. All righty.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.